We started the We the People's Project with a vision that a working class coalitions of conservatives, progressives, and independents could come together to work on building a house united here in America. It's a place where people who make this country function every day come together. The important people who are not politicians, they're not necessarily the talking heads on the screens that you see all the time, but they're the people that are often spoken of and seldom spoken to. So we bring those people together. We all have a great conversation. People of differing mindsets come together to have a conversation in a civil way and really talk about the issues that mean the most to us, the issues that we're talking about at our own dinner tables with our families, and that really need to be talked about, but often just get ignored. So thank you everybody for being here tonight. We've got an incredible lineup of speakers. We're talking about the First Amendment. The Supreme Court has consistently ruled that speech, which some may find offensive or that may even be false, is nevertheless protected by the First Amendment. Should social media companies be able to restrict the communications and expressions of their users by a different standard? So, as I said, we've got an incredible lineup of guests. We've got 4 speakers this evening to discuss the topic. We've got Angel Eduardo, who is if you're not familiar with Angel Eduardo, he's a writer, he's a musician, a visual artist, a friend of mine, a former guest on the Derate the Hate podcast. Yeah, he's an accomplished writer, he's an incredible writer. He's been published in several major publications. Most recently, Angel has taken a position as a senior writer and editor with the organization FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. So welcome, Angel.
Thanks, Will. Great to be here. I really appreciate it. And thank
Very
you all
nice
for being
to have
here.
you. Very nice to have you. Then we're going to have Dan Pipes. He's a retired Army colonel. He's the Red co-chair of the local Braver Angels Vermont Alliance. He tends an extensive orchard, keeps bees, and produces local maple syrup. So Dan, welcome to the We the People's Project.
Mute here. Yeah, thank you.
There we go. Thank you very much, Dan. And Aaron Kinsvetter is a former University of Vermont professor, and he is a professional therapist. So welcome, Aaron. Good to see you. Good to have you here tonight. And then Jeffrey Lockwood. Jeffrey is a 42-year union pipe fitter from Saginaw, Michigan. He's a husband and father of two 7-year-old twin boys. He serves as a union steward and an executive board member for his union, and ran recently as a Democrat for Michigan's 93rd District State House seat. So welcome, Jeffrey. All right. Very good to have you all here, and welcome to all of our guests. So thank you for taking time out of your evening to come join us. What we're going to do is we're going to allow each of our speakers to speak for about 4 to 5 minutes about their thoughts on our particular question tonight, and then we'll have a short little round the horn kind of response to from our 4 speakers, and then we'll move into our question and experience time here on the We the People's Project, We the People's Forums. What we like to do is have everybody that's on the call, or as many people as we can fit in on the call, kind of give their experience, kind of give their questions, or ask a question of our speakers, give their experience with this particular topic, and really kind of make your voice heard. So we'll try to make time for as many people as possible to do that. A couple minutes at a shot, and if you'd like to, all you got to do is raise your hand after we get through our initial speakers. If each of you could just let us know kind of where you fall politically, just so we have an idea. You can just put the can put a C or well, put a red or R for red, blue for B for blue, or what do we normally do? Do we do P for purple or what for in between?
Other,
Other.
sometimes we
Yeah,
do
you can just
other.
put O or other in front of your name. So if you need to rename yourself for the Zoom chat, just go to those three little dots next to your name in the participants section and change your name and kind of indicate that whether you find yourself on the red side of things, blue side of things, or other somewhere. And that way when we're taking questions and experience, that everybody can kind of know where you fall on that spectrum. So with that, we'll get started and expecting a great conversation tonight. So again, I want to thank everybody personally. I am Wilk, by the way. I'm Wilk, host of the Derate the Hate podcast, member of the We the People's Project. And Dennis, our troubleshooter, looks like he has a question real quick. So go ahead, Dennis.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to welcome everybody, and secondly, to let you know that the Braver Angels Zoom account here has captions. So if you'd like to be able to set up those captions, there's three little dots in your lower right-hand, lower part of your Zoom account, and it either says captions or more with three dots. But anyway, a lot of folks have really appreciated this, so I thought I'd mention it.
Very nice. Thank you very much, Dennis. We appreciate that. So, all right. So again, our question tonight for our speakers, or basically the premise of our conversation, is the Supreme Court has consistently ruled that speech, which some may find offensive or that may even be false, is nevertheless protected by the First Amendment. Should social media companies be able to restrict the communications and expressions of their users by a different standard? So again, we'll start with our first speaker tonight, and that is Angel Eduardo, who again is a senior writer and editor for FIRE, the Foundation of Individual Rights and Expression. Go ahead, Angel. You have 5 minutes.
I feel like I'm in the hot seat now. Well, thank you, Wilk. It's great to be here. Thank you all for being here. While I am a employee of FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, which is a free speech advocacy organization, I speak only for myself. Just want to make that clear. Although my understanding of FIRE's position on this is pretty much mine as well. But, you know, just to clear the air there, I'm speaking only for myself. I'm not a representative of FIRE today. The short answer to the question is yes. I think so. And I think most people would probably agree if they thought of it differently than maybe they tend to. And so I like to think in analogies and hypotheticals. So picture a very large, very popular Hollywood party, like a huge soiree, and it's 24/7 and the door is open and it's, you know, at Elon Musk's house. And this is a huge party where all these people come. It's super cool to be there. Random people show up, you know, just everyday regular people, but also celebrities and politicians, and people sort of mingle and hang out and you get to talk to each other, and it's super fun, and sometimes crazy stuff happens. But you're there for the ride, right? And you kind of come and go as you please. The door is open. And because it's such a huge and popular party, because there's so many people there who are influential and interesting and notable and intelligent, a lot of things get discussed there. The news gets discussed. Politics gets discussed. Deals happen. People start interacting with one another and come up with ideas. They come up with things. Politicians discuss policy, or they inform others about ideas for their policies. And all of this is happening in this party at Elon Musk's house. But then let's say somebody starts being obnoxious, or Elon Musk thinks this person is being obnoxious. And they go, you know what? I don't like you. I don't like what you're doing. I don't like what you're saying. You got to go. Now, in this scenario, I think most people would their intuitions are that, yeah, it's Elon Musk's house. So if he doesn't want somebody there, he can kick him out. Even if I disagree, even if I don't think that person deserves to be kicked out, even if I agree with what that person was saying, even if I think Elon is being unfair in kicking this person out, it's his house. So he doesn't have to have anybody at his house that he doesn't want there. That's Twitter, as far as I'm concerned. You know, it's a huge platform. A lot of people go on there and they discuss all kinds of things. And, you know, the reason why I made this hypothetical a very large kind of Hollywood party that's very popular and influential is because even though it's a house party inside somebody's house, it does spill over into the real world, right? Conversations that happen at Elon Musk's house kind of affect you at your job the next day, right? Or the news the next day, or articles that people write, or even policy that politicians try to implement, right? So it's not that there's no effect and that there's no kind of there's no blurred boundary between these two locations and paradigms, right?
Sure.
But the fact remains, it is Elon Musk's house, and you are invited only if and for as long as Elon Musk likes. And if Elon Musk decides to sell his house for 45 billion tomorrow and somebody buys it, you know, Jeff Bezos buys it for 45 billion, it's now Jeff Bezos's house and he can change the rules however he likes. And that's his right because he owns the thing. And any one of us, no matter how invested we are in the party, how much we enjoy being at the party, how much we get out of being at the party, you know, maybe I go to the party and I actually use the party as a place for me and my coworkers to have meetings. We just go, hey, I'll meet you at the party and we'll talk about that thing we were going to do for work. Great. But if I suddenly get kicked out, I'm going to have to find another office space, right?
Sure.
Because that's not what it was. That's just what I was using it for.
Yeah. Wrap it up about
so-
30 seconds.
Yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, that's what Twitter is. And you know, anybody who owns it, it's a private company. It's got to be that way. There are considerations we'll talk about, I'm sure. But overall, that's my point.
No, it's a fantastic point, and thank you for making it, Angel. Appreciate it. So next we'll go to our next speaker, Dan Pipes. Dan, what is your take on this question?
Thanks, Will. And just for the record, I'd rather eat my foot than be on Zoom. So I'm not nearly as polished as my predecessor, Angel. He did a wonderful job there. So kudos to him. I'll be clear up front. Social media companies are actively ignoring the First Amendment rights of users with no repercussions. They do it daily. So my stance is no. I believe that social media companies must be reined in by Congress, much as the oligarchs of the late 19th century were and Ma Bell was in the 20th century. That said, I am a fan of free speech and certainly the Constitution. So once I've said that the social media companies need to be reined in, the question shifts for me. Why and how become critical. So the why should be obvious. The rise of social media as a defining aspect of our culture has also contributed significantly to our decline. And I could spend the rest of my time illustrating this, but I have other points I'd like to make. On to the how. I believe that Congress must do several things to blunt the disastrous social impact of big tech on our nation. First, they must take real steps to stop the hoovering up of private information from our homes, vehicles, fiscal transactions, and recreational pursuits. Does anyone else feel a little queasy driving down the highway, knowing that your movement is being tracked in real time by cameras linked to databases that have a file on you? And don't tell me that they don't. My toll bills arrive with an efficiency unmatched by most other governmental endeavors. Secondly, Congress must stop big tech from expanding their dominance to other markets. The obviously unfair advantages that tech grants themselves in algorithms must be curbed. Expecting them to play fair with those who could replace them is equally absurd. Similarly, using their platforms to exploit non-public information gleaned from competitors' business models has to end. I believe that a lot of this has happened because the social media phenomenon has exploded so quickly and it continues to grow and morph. If I had told you 15 years ago that you would willingly carry around a device that will allow your location, health statistics, and conversations to be monitored and sold to companies who in turn will bombard you with ads tailored to get you to use that device more, would you have believed me? The largest and most problematic how this is mitigated is the most obvious and the most difficult. Congress must shut off the millions of dollars flowing into their campaign funds from the technocrats. The idea that corporate campaign contributions are free speech is absurd. Congress is defined these days by perpetual fundraising, punctuated occasionally by a vote or a soundbite designed to rile up the base. Can we expect them to cut off the gushers of cash that are offered? Maybe right after they vote for term limits, right? We're hoping that an addict will voluntarily clean up. Human nature and common sense suggests otherwise. Khrushchev said he would sell us the rope that we would use to hang ourselves. He was a little ahead of his time. Now we're buying the apps that divide and weaken us, and we blithely give them to our kids as babysitters. What we're discussing here is a symptom of a much larger disease. There is no quick fix to the social media contagion. It must be studied in a dispassionately apolitical manner, and we must embrace the good and shun the poison. To that end, I'll toss a final branch on this bonfire. The ability to critique extremism from any direction must be allowed. Otherwise, conspiracy theorists will multiply exponentially like mold in the crevices of social media. Positions based purely on emotions and feeling must be met with logic and civility and allowed to collapse under their own weight. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you very much, Dan. That's a fascinating viewpoint. Thank you for sharing it. All right, our next guest is Aaron Kinsvetter.
Kinsvater, yeah, right.
Kinsvetter.
Yeah,
Thank you
well,
very much, Aaron. Well, it's good to have you here.
hey, it's good to be here, and it's nice to be here with a fellow Vermonter and also with someone from FIRE, which is an organization that I've admired for a very long time. So I just want to discuss this from what I see as sort of the moral trade-off view, and Dan made one very important point that I'm going to make, but I think when faced with a decision like this, and by the way, my answer is no, they should not be allowed to censor, that free speech should be absolute. But there's a reason for that. And I think that anytime like a question like this is called, that there are different moral tensions that come into play. And I have seen a number of calls in higher education for the circumscription of free speech in the interest of protecting people from harm. And I do, as a therapist, I do concede that speech can be harmful. For sure. Like I see people who are victims of emotional abuse and, you know, in a way they've been harmed by speech. But you also got to look at that as a trade-off, that if we were to censor, say, someone who is using racial names or someone, what do we give up? It's always when decisions are made, around these kinds of issues, we sometimes gain something, but we also give up something. So it's more of a trade-off than a decision. So if we censor in the interest of being humane, then we might have a platforms where, you know, certain words are used less, but what then do we give up? And this is where I'm going to come in on a point that Dan made. Dan said that it's really important that we maintain our ability to critique extremism. And I would just expand that and say that it's really important. It is a foundation of our entire society since the Enlightenment that we maintain the ability to subject ideas to scrutiny, and then let the biases in those ideas play out. Now, this has become very difficult with social media because there's a great deal of information that needs to be digested all at once, and we're trying to figure out how that's going to work. But liberalism, which is the ability to speak what one will and allow another person to speak what one will, creates to an essential societal process where we're able to discern what is true from what is not. This is incredibly protective when it comes around to things like stereotypes, that if one has a negative stereotype and wants to voice that on a social media platform, it's actually good for society that they do that, because society can then subject those stereotypes to scrutiny. And so it's liberalism, the ability to say what one will, even though there's a certain mercy that comes with sort of outlawing language that we don't like. The most important protective mechanism of minority rights and minority well-being in the country is the ability to subject distorted beliefs about minorities and so forth to the scrutiny of a larger audience. And I think that that has to come before legal considerations of ownership and so forth. So that's what I think.
Yeah, that's another fantastic viewpoint. So thank you, Aaron, for sharing. And now we will go to our Jeffrey Lockwood with the final point from our first round of ideas here with regard to our question.
Thanks a lot. So you all made some terrific points, and I agree with a lot of the stuff you said. Dan, I agree with a lot of the stuff you said. I almost had to rethink whether I was a Republican or a Democrat for a second there. So here's how I feel about it, and this is just my personal belief. Yes, I do think they have the right to do that. No, I don't think, I don't like it. But the thing that I always chalk that up to, and like Angel said, was if you don't like, or if you're at somebody's house, they can tell you whether they want you saying that or not, or doing whatever it is, and they can ask you to leave if they don't like it. That's kind of how I always felt. The other thing is that little legal disclaimer that I know I mentioned this before, the little disclaimer that we all check and sign and never read, that covers all that stuff about tracking you and all that good stuff. You know, I'm guilty as anybody else. I never read it, and I sign off, feel like I signed my life away. I agree that these social medias and all the fake information out there is definitely a problem, and I think it's a huge problem in our society, and it's gonna get worse. I don't know the solution. I can tell you some of the effects it's had on me personally, and my mindset is like, I don't even know who to believe anymore or what to believe. Everything seems like somebody's got an ulterior motive or is trying to sell me something. And I think I chalk that up to years of social media and listening in on everything you got to say, and throwing those advertisements at you and everything like that. So long story short, I don't think it's right. I don't like it at all. Unfortunately, I think legally, from where I stand, and I'm not a law scholar or anything, but I think that they have the right to do that. So that's where I stand on it. That's all I really got about it.
Hey,
Thanks.
that's all right. No, it's that's what we're here to do, Jeffrey, is just share our thoughts, share our opinions on the question, and thank you for sharing your experience. So now what I'd like to do is I'm gonna go around the table here again, or a virtual table, I guess, right? Go around the table and give each of our main speakers another couple minutes just to share their thoughts. I know there was a little bit more thoughts and ideas, from after our first speaker, kind of people were applying, but and that's fine. We I appreciate each of you giving your different perspective, and now we'll go around, just in case anybody thought of anything else based on what they've heard so far. We'll kind of go around there, and then we'll go and we'll get some question and experience from our audience tonight. So Angel, go ahead and take a couple more minutes and just
Sure.
throw in, and maybe in fact, even if you want to talk a little bit about, I know you had written that article, Twitter is not the town square in the Quillette, which was a fascinating article, and if anybody hasn't read it, they should. It was a really good one. So go ahead and take a couple more minutes, and we'll go with there.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is that, Aaron, Jeffrey, and Dan, I don't disagree with anything you said. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I caught a single thing I disagree with. I think it's just a matter of understanding the context that we're in, right? Because yes, Dan, you brought up a bunch of stuff about tracking and invasion of privacy and people's data being taken and used and misused. And a lot of that is probably in the terms of service that none of us read, but we sign, that Jeffrey mentioned. So that's part of the problem is, we should be more mindful of that. Regulation is probably a good move as well, but we should also sort of just take responsibility. Like, what are we signing up for? We should know. And yeah, Aaron, I totally agree. I would consider myself a free speech absolutist. I think anyone should be able to say whatever they want, and anyone else should be able to say whatever they want about it. And I think that that's the best way to go. I don't think trying to silence people or censor people works. I think it just lets those ideas fester. And I for one feel very confident in my ideas. I can defend them fairly well. And if I can't, I'm happy to discover that, because that means I'm wrong. So either way, it's a win-win for me. But the problem is that we're all talking about this stuff within the context of social media, these platforms that are privately owned companies. They're not town squares, as Wilk mentioned. I wrote a piece about this for Quillette. We try to treat them like town squares, but that's not what they are. And if we wanted them to be that, they would have to change in significant ways. First of all, Elon Musk wouldn't be able to own it, right? It would belong to the US government or whatever, or it would at least be, a public utility like the phone company and stuff like that. But it would be highly regulated by the government. And it would be, like a public park. There are things you can and cannot do at a public park. And the cops show up if there's a fight. And if you light a fire and you're not supposed to, or if you play loud music, you need a permit to have a rally and stuff like that. So I think that's the main point of contention, is just understanding that we're talking about a private platform that we're forcing into this public square paradigm where all these questions pop up.
Very good. Yeah, no. So now, Dan, we'll go right back to you, and what are your thoughts on what we've heard so far, Dan? Oh, you're muted.
Here we go. Is that better?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Excellent. Similar to Angel, there's very little disagreement. I enjoyed listening to both Aaron and Jeff. It did occur to me that using the house analogy, when really there's only one house to be in, it's this to me, that sounds like a monopoly, and a monopoly needs to be regulated as I mentioned before. You know, the JP Morgans of the world, the Ma Bells, the government does need to come in and bust these trusts up and level the playing field a little bit. I really liked, Jeffrey, I liked your bringing in the distrust of journalism, and I do attribute that in large part to social media. The journalism as a profession, I believe it's something when I was younger I really admired and I looked up to it, and I just don't have that sense anymore, and I think we've lost a lot because primarily because of the noise on social media and not having the confidence that this is true or factual. So that was something I was thinking of. Aaron, I always like to be reminded about the classical liberal, and I love actually to meet such people. My co-chair here in Northwestern Vermont, she's a classical liberal, and we get along famously. We disagree quite a bit, but we get along very well. So thank you for that. Wilk, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Dan. So now we'll go to our classic, well, as stated in his title here, our classic homeless liberal.
Yeah, something happened to the liberals. I don't know where they went, but
It's definitely changed the landscape of things.
Oh yeah, well, the landscape changed. I stayed right where I was, but all of a sudden, I don't know. I'm all of a sudden on the right. I don't know how I got there, but
yeah,
well, whatever. It feels pretty comfortable.
Sure.
Anyway, so I mean, I concede the legal points that Angel's making. They make a lot of sense to me, and I get that. I also agree, though, with Dan's perspective that I think something needs to be done about that, because it may be that Twitter is not the town square in a legal sense of the term, but I do think in a practical sense it is. And it is serving that liberal function, whether it was meant to or not. It's the new opinion page that used to be in the newspapers. The concern I have is that censorship is, you know, the first thing that authoritarians do when they take over some sort of entity is they censor what they don't like. And we need to be really careful of that in our society, that because the moment that, because censorship also always expands, and and once it becomes an accepted tool in one context, it becomes an accepted tool in another context. And that way, I'm going to make a really, I don't know if this analogy quite works, but it's sort of like the nuclear bomb. It's like once you create it, you can't uncreate it. And censorship is a little bit like that. And censorship is dangerous to liberal democracies. And that means that it's favorable to the formation of authoritarianism, which ultimately it will suppress the weakest among a population. So that's how I would expand my thoughts.
No, that's incredible point. Yeah, for sure. Jeffrey, what additional thoughts do you have based on what everybody else has been saying here?
So basically I just want to add, as far as like the unhindered free speech and whatever, and being able to say what you want to say as long as the next person can say what they want to say. I like that idea. I think that's a solid base. I think that the only problem is that more people need to be stepping up to counter a lot of people just keep their mouth shut these days, you know, and just not my problem. I don't want nothing to do with it. And that's there's not enough people out there counteracting the nonsense, you know what I mean? And in order for something like that to be effective, I think there's going to be need to be a lot more people that are willing to step up and say the other side in a civil manner, you know. And that's another thing as well. People need to be more receptive of criticism. It's real hard to criticize people these days or give anybody any kind of even constructive criticism without offending or getting them on standoffish. That's just what I wanted to add to that. But yeah, I'll turn it back over to you, Will.
Yeah, sure. So, well, thank you very much, Jeffrey, and thanks to our four speakers for really laying out, very descriptive, thoughts and ideas with regard to this topic, because this is one that's definitely it's definitely near and dear to a lot of people, right? Because when people don't feel heard, they often go, they either go completely dormant and go away, or they get angry, right? They get upset. And one of the things that I think we need to do as people, and one of the things that Braver Angels is so good at, is bringing people together of differing mindsets and giving them a place where they can speak. So thank you guys for sharing your thoughts, your opinions, your experience with this particular topic. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start going around and allowing people from our audience to or anybody that's on the call tonight is welcome to put up their hand, share, take a couple minutes to share your questions, share your experience. If you have a question for one of our speakers, please ask it. Obviously the only thing that we ask is make sure everything that we say and do here tonight is civil. And if you have a question, I'm sure our speakers would be more than happy to respond. If you've got an experience of your own that's on your mind, please share it. We're all about giving people a chance at the podium and letting your voice be heard. So let's start with, we'll start with our very own Rita. Go ahead, Rita. Take a minute or two to ask a question or share an experience.
Thank you, Wilk, and thank you to our speakers. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed hearing everything that y'all shared. One thing I do want to clear up, though, when I joined Braver Angels, we were instructed that this is supposed to be applause. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I'm not crazy. I'm not over here. We just don't have enough people that have maintained that training. So when you see this, that's applause. Okay. So let's get that out of the way. Now then, listening, at 65 years of age, I've observed I have a real interest in people, period, psychology. And then I later found out that sociology was something that I really love also. And in thinking as a mother and a grandmother, one of the things that strikes me is that I'm a person that really, I was taught that not only can other people role model for me, but that I should be a role model for other people. So I'm one that looks for role models, even at this age. I love when I find someone that I really appreciate. I like to know more about them and what makes them tick and why they have made the decisions that they have. That being said, I have two daughters I have a daughter that's 39 and a daughter that's 36. I have grandchildren, and I know that things have changed dramatically from the time that they were growing up. That being said, it seems to me that social media, and something that Dan had mentioned that I thought was really important, is the monopolizing of of this particular type of media. And, we have so many parents that are working, and I hate to say it, but babysitting. So my question is, can we see that we're not working with the same paradigms that we've worked with in the past? This is, we're working with.
Take about 10 more seconds. And was that question for one of the
It was
speakers?
for anyone, yeah, any of the speakers that might like to address it, because I agree with them about the free speech. But what I found myself saying is, but now that I'm seeing the monopolizing and the fact that children don't seem to be as concerned about their parents and what their parents try to teach them as they are with their peer group.
All right.
So yeah.
Yep. So it was Dan able to make it back in, because I know, he wasn't able to make it back in, because I know he was the one that talked about the monopolizing.
He did make it back in, but he might have dropped off again. I don't know.
May have dropped back out. I know he was having some connection issues.
Oh.
So does do any of our other speakers here very quick have any insight as to what they would do as a solution for like that monopoly, the monopoly idea? Aaron?
I can't speak to the monopoly idea, but I can speak to Rita's interest in the psychology of social media. There's an unprecedented social crisis going on, with an 80% spike among young women and girls that is consistent with the development of the like button on social media. So social media is terrible for especially young women, but also young men. So so I'll just say that. If you want to read more, the book, The Coddling of the American Mind.
Coddling of the American Mind.
In great detail.
Very good.
Great book.
All right. We will now go to, let's go to John Botter.
Okay, and please cut me off, because I could talk about this topic for an hour if you wanted to.
Yep. Just take about a minute
Somebody
or two.
mentioned, yeah, somebody mentioned about all the fine print, and it's an interesting thing, because I know when they came out with HIPAA, I read all the fine print, and I asked my doctor if I could make amends, make some revisions to it. And the answer is no. If you want my service, you're going to sign this. And the same thing, I'm not on Twitter, but the same thing sure goes with Twitter and whatever other social media platforms you've got. I think you should read it to know what they're used for, but you don't have an option to, other than not to get on their platform. I don't like them collecting all the information, but the good thing with that is if you're looking for a new pair of shoes, all you have to do is search for shoes, and you will get all the advertisements that you need that makes your search much easier.
Right.
So there's a real good piece to that. I would like a button that after I bought my shoes that I could turn off the rest of them and say to them all, hey, I bought my shoes, so let's just get on with it. And I also think that there's a big difference between consenting adults and children. I don't know what to do with the young girls who are on it, but if some 50-year-old woman looks at a 50-year-old woman that is on some kind of a diet, the 50-year-old woman who's looking at it should have the reasonable skills to know whether it's harmful to her or not. The 14-year-old girl may not know that yet. So regulating it somehow for our children, I think, is way different than regulating it for the rest of us. So that's all I've got. I don't have a question for anyone.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing your experience, John. Appreciate that. And now we'll go to our very own Jerry Silberman. Jerry, what question or experience would you like to share?
So first an experience and then a question. I am not on any social media. I still get tracked simply because I'm on the internet, which I frankly could not communicate with people without, because people don't answer their phones anymore. So I'm stuck. That raises the question to me. You know, there's been a bipartisan abandonment of any regulation of monopoly for the last 50 years, and it's costing us all. Regulating these things as public utilities, you know, is to me is part of the solution. The question I have for Angel, with his analogy here, just from a constitutional perspective, is we now know that Twitter, under its previous owners, was directly channeling censorship on behalf of the government, right? So it was actively enabling censorship at the behest of the government, which to me is a violation of the Constitution. That you know, I would accept your private party deal, but if unbeknownst to anyone at that private party, they are taking orders from the government,
Yep.
they are violating our rights.
Yeah.
They're violating the Constitution and our free speech rights. And that, you know, I'm not exactly sure how to address it, but how do you integrate that into your extended simile?
Yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, I guess Elon could, you know, have a phone call from the president and say, hey, kick this guy out of your party. And he could go, okay. I guess he can do that. I would agree with you that that's a very bad state of affairs, given the fact that, you know, it's the government doing what, you know, exerting its influence in that way, which I think is wrong. But it gets really muddy there, and I don't have the legal or constitutional knowledge to really navigate it myself. But I definitely agree that that's alarming and definitely a problem. And I'll just say also, you know, the fact that it is the, you know, probably the largest social media platform is certainly one of the most popular, and it's where a lot of things happen. It's a good idea for us to encourage a different sort of paradigm, right? So it would be nice for us to encourage Elon to have different rules for his house party that were more amenable to a culture of free speech. But at the end of the day, it's up to him.
All right.
Mm.
Well, very good. Let's move on to let's see. Do we have Dennis, as our troubleshooter, did you have something from the troubleshooter perspective, or did you have a personal perspective?
I have a personal perspective, and I just wanted to respond to Aaron and kind of jump on Jerry's point also. The point I was going to bring up had to do with government stepping in to own Twitter. And as to Jerry's point, where they can use politics to influence what's put into Twitter, I think would more than compound the problem. It would totally exacerbate the whole solution. And, you know, as far as Elon Musk owning it, it seems like there's a lot of criticism, you know, free speech discussion about censorship that would tend to self-regulate some of this, as it has with Facebook. Facebook is really, as I understand, really declined because of the charges that they've had on censorship and exclusion. But, and by the way, I think they ought to be regulating artificial intelligence too. That's
Sure.
my point.
All right. Well, thank you, Dennis. Let's go next to Hank, and then to Colleen.
Free speech stops where harm begins. And so if you're in a theater, you can't yell fire. It's against the law. Why? Because it could cause harm. To some extent, that's already practiced by these private platforms. They will not permit sexually, explicit kinds of posts because the audience does include those for whom, when you do that to a person of a certain age, then it is against the law. It's been decided that's manner of law. And so I think that's the other part of it. Free speech stops where harm begins. Now, I would add for harm, we know that a divided society leads to death because divided societies don't take care of their citizens the way that united societies do. That's a well-studied phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have people making free speech lies on these private media platforms that
Take about 10 more seconds there, Hank.
that fuel the division. And I would argue that that's effectively harming people because of the knock-on effect of it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Hank, for sharing your experience or your perspective. Let's go to Colleen next, and then I don't know that we even have too many outside reds on here. So, well, we'll go to Colleen, then Noel. Well, and then we'll just go to Lincoln and Len. So, Colleen, you're up.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, Jerry asked my question already, and then Hank sort of covered it, and then so I'll go with if it is ever figured out how to regulate Twitter or whatever app is the big thing, as a truly public town square space, how could the algorithms that are built into these apps that censor or amplify participants disproportionately, how could that be regulated fairly? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Thanks for listening.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. That's a fascinating question. Does any of our speakers have an idea on that? Maybe Dan. I know you would. I'm glad to see you got back in here, Dan. Do you got any ideas as to how those? I think you were the first one to bring up the algorithms. Do you have any ideas as to how those algorithms themselves, which are part of the business model, really, in some of these social media platforms, how those could be regulated?
Yeah, well, I think we're going to need to get a room full of 30-pound brain guys together to make that happen. And that's decidedly not me.
Okay.
I apologize for missing the previous conversations. I'm on satellite internet here, so I got kicked out. And
they didn't shoot down your satellite, did they, Dan?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm not wearing my tinfoil hat. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But,
it's Elon's satellite. He heard you say you wanted him regulated. So
yeah.
I think I have a thought about that question about the algorithm.
But quite seriously, I think the algorithm, all of these things, as I mentioned in my first go round, it has to be apolitical. And I think there's the rub. How do we make that happen so that people will trust a board or a collection, a governing body? But it cannot have once it has the slightest whiff of being politicized, then immediately the accusations will start coming that it's being weaponized and so got kicked. And so we have to do this deliberately. And unfortunately, I don't think we can do it quickly. I think we have to make incremental progress and just do one thing right at a time and then build on that. But that's the thought from here.
All right. Very good.
And I would just add to that, one way to do that, Dan, is maybe to make it public, make it transparent.
Yeah, the more transparency, the better, right, guys? For sure.
But
Noel.
Well, I was just going to say, it's actually not, it is a fascinating question, but it's also an old one. It's basically who watches the Watchmen.
Right. Yeah, and, that's right. That's right.
And the answer is we don't know. Because
that's
the only way to keep it successfully apolitical is to be hands off, or as hands off as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So
No, that's a fascinating point as well. All right, Noelle, what do you got to share with us tonight?
Great. Thank you all. I hope my sound's okay.
Oh yeah.
I really loved Angel's analogy. Thank you so much for putting this really beautifully. That's going to be my image from now on, I think. And I think there are actually a lot of ways that people can speak and read about different ideas in the US. And this little number of commercial social media companies aren't the whole space for speech, but this is the focus for lots and lots of attention. So I really appreciate the debate about it tonight. And just thinking about it, that current laws do allow Elon Musk to only have people at his parties that are behaving in ways he's comfortable with. And we're actually seeing more legal decisions that give companies even more power to decide who they're going to serve and who's not welcome. So it seems like we've made rules that private companies don't have to do that, but we want it to happen. So I'm kind of curious for people who seem to want a true public space where there aren't limits on free speech, if they would want the government to establish an online forum or media channels or news sites where anyone's able to say anything. Because it's kind of hard to imagine in a commercial space that really happening. Although I did like the idea of trying to get Elon to have different, little broader views on this. And I also noticed that even in this forum, which is about whether there should be rules, we have rules about only allowing civil comments. And we've all already opted in to the rules that some of us don't like in the abstract, but somehow they've made this debate really civil and effective. So thank you all.
All right. Looks like a couple people put their hands down, so we will go to Cynthia here quick, and then if Lincoln and Len still wanted to chime in, we'll go to them after Cynthia. But Cynthia, what do you have to share with us tonight?
Well, I hope I can't really consolidate this very well, but I have had a lot of lifetime. My work has been on the internet, and that idea of public square doesn't really apply with social media because of the amplification, and so not every voice is equal, and it's protected by Section 230 that kept coming up during Trump's administration, because they're excluded from a liability that applies to publications like paper publications. The New York Times, they're liable for their content because they're considered publishers. The social media applications are not considered publishers. But there's there's a slimy aspect to it, because in truth they really are, given that they promote content based upon its viewership. So if a comment is negative, negativity becomes amplified. People by human nature love stuff that just is angering. We get all fired up. We want to share it. And so they amplify that. They actively amplify things. So they are actually, in a sense, promoting a message. So that it's really this Section 230 that's going to really, really come to a head in the future. So anyway, I wanted to say that because in terms of like in the beginning of the web, when every comment on message boards had just equal weight, you could say whatever you wanted, but nobody was going to see it unless they actively searched for it. I know that, but
Right.
but once it becomes amplified, then it's in front of your face whether or not you want to see it. So that's
Sure.
the thing.
No, that's a fascinating point, Cynthia, that you talk about those algorithms and how they amplified. One of the things that I talk about quite often on my podcast is the fact that toxicity is generally what goes viral, but it doesn't necessarily go viral on its own, right? I mean, just to your point, it's getting a big boost.
Huge for monetary purposes, for their income.
Yep.
That's their business model. I mean, so that's Section 230 is a game changer for them.
No, that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up, Cynthia, because I think a lot of people don't realize that it's not just, it's a little different than back in the day when on the op-ed page they'd put it above the fold or below the fold. Now they're just pushing it out there. Thank you very much.
If I may.
Oh, go ahead.
If I may,
Go ahead.
I just want to chime in here. I appreciate that point, Cynthia. I'll just say I've written about this as well a little bit. if you go on YouTube and you search for puppies, and you go funny puppy videos, and then hilarious puppy videos, and then hysterical puppy videos, and you do that for like 20 minutes, for the next few days, you're going to get nothing but puppy videos fed to you. Right.
Right.
So that is all just to say that it's only half true that the algorithm feeds you negativity. The algorithm feeds you what it thinks will keep your attention. And what keeps your attention is up to you. You can decide, am I going to respond to this vicious, hateful, angry stuff by being vicious, hateful, and angry, or am I going to reject it and look for something else? Because then you'll start to get that something else.
Great point.
That's something to keep in mind.
Very good. Very good. David Lapp, our fearless leader over there, has got his hand up. So David, jump in with your thoughts and perspective in here tonight.
Yeah, it's a question for Angel. And Angel, my question is, what about the point about monopolies? And so the idea being that, okay, so we do, I don't know if you would agree or disagree that, let's say Twitter, let's talk about Twitter and Facebook. I don't know if you would agree or disagree that they're monopolies. My own perspective, it seems like persuasive to me that you could say they are monopolies. But if they are monopolies, does that mean that the government should be able, there should be a way to either regulate them or they should be busted up because of that? So anyway, what's your point to that specific? I think Dan was the person that raised that. What's your response to that idea, and how does that affect your thinking, if at all?
I don't know if I would agree that they're monopolies, really. There are all these other alternative social media sites. The thing is that they're not as popular. Like, most people are not on there, or there aren't as many people on there as you would like. But you can make your own. You can jump to another one, and there are plenty on offer that are all kinds of, Reddit and 4chan and all kinds of stuff. There's Truth Social. You can, Trump made his own. So I'm not sure if it's actually right that they're a monopoly. But even if they were, and we decided we need to figure out how to do this, how to regulate this, that's going to take a ton of work. That's going to take a ton of sitting down and figuring this out. And my main point about the not being the town square thing is, we can decide that we want to turn it into one, but that means we have a lot of work to do. We can't simply declare it so and then proceed as we were, because things are going to change fundamentally. I think people just need to recognize that.
Yeah, I really liked your analogy, Angel, in your article about how we've used or many people have used Starbucks for so long as a common workspace, to kind of do their thing. And if we were already, if the government was going to come in and declare that Starbucks was the place where everybody could go to work, there's nothing that Starbucks, or you couldn't force Starbucks to continue providing free Wi-Fi and nice furniture and things like that. So no, that's awesome. Let's go to, or did you have anything else to share, David? Or good. Let's go to Lincoln up in Vermont.
Hey, thank you, Wilk. There we go. A couple of people have brought up some of the points that I was going to make, so I appreciate. Let's see. Yes, Cynthia bringing up Section 230. That, I think that's a great piece to have in this conversation, because it's such an important part of how do these spaces become regulated to the extent that they do. And Jerry bringing up, I don't know how many people are familiar with the Missouri v. Biden case or the Twitter files, but both of those have indisputably now opened up the window into that the government hasn't just been asking for social media companies and big tech companies to behave in certain ways, but they've been mandating and coercing. And so First Amendment in a legal way, those lines have been crossed, and that's going to be really interesting to see how that unfolds, because it's not very actively being talked about. I don't see many investigative pieces about those things right now, and so it's not getting out as a public narrative. But I wonder if anybody, maybe Aaron or Dan want to speak to how they might see the ramifications of those legal battles as public attention becomes more aware of the First Amendment lines that have been legally crossed, how that might change the landscape. And I also just wanted to echo one of the things that I heard about this idea of, yes, it's sort of by default being treated like a public square, even though it's private space. And there's the argument, well, you can just go elsewhere. And I think that part of the pressure to figure out some answers to what we can do to treat companies that are big enough to be acting as monopolies more like public utilities. I think to the degree that we don't do that, what we're going to have is just further and further driving towards radicalizing people and extremes in positions, because when you have huge institutions that are actively censoring, I don't see any alternative to people responding by becoming more and more radicalized, and how unhealthy for the social fabric that is. But yeah, I wonder if anybody wants to speak a little bit more. I think I've heard Angel speak to it, and I appreciate your perspectives there, Angel, to that question of how things might legally shift moving forward as things get broken open about what's going on behind the scenes. I don't know how many people are familiar with In-Q-Tel as the CIA's capital venture firm in the past, but the government also has an interesting relationship to the beginnings of many of these tech companies, and right. Backdoors built into them, and so, sure. So it's a mess. The links between government and the big tech sector is very bizarre. So I think there's a lot of room for really pushing for the idea that these are public utility spaces, and what does that mean? Yeah. Like Angel said, it's complicated to change the parameters, but that does feel like an important directive.
So let's hear from Dan on that, because I know Dan had mentioned that monopoly, the monopolization in his first thing. We'll kind of go to Dan here, and then we'll actually move right into our common ground section. One of the things that we like to do with these, especially with multiple speakers, is and especially with a great conversation like this, is go to each one of the speakers for a couple more minutes right here as we get closer to the end of our time, and just see what people thought that they saw in each person's conversation that brought them to a place of common ground. So Dan, why don't you speak to what Lincoln had to say? What legal solutions that you think might be possible going down the road, and with the ideas of monopolies and how that could possibly be broken up.
Well, one of the things listening to Lincoln that struck me was that as these offenses to our First Amendment rights occur, how do we know about it? Because people disappear, poof, they're gone. And where do you hear about this? How many people actually get a print newspaper? Or, who's covering the people who have been banned from pick your platform, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it may be? So once again, that links us back into the monopolies portion of it, where you have this right not only to ban individuals, but now let's talk about the business models, and you have this terribly unfair advantage, which we can't expect them not to use because, well, they're capitalists and that's what you do. You've got an advantage, you take it, but they can see the algorithms of the competing platforms that are starting to grow, and they can easily suffocate them and say, wow, that's a great thing. Or they can make it their own and simply not drive any traffic to these sites. There's where we get into the monopoly. But at the individual level, my biggest concern is, who really knows how many people are being having their rights just throttled?
Yeah, no, it's really hard to say. Okay, I'm going to just do. I know both Rita and Noel had asked a question before. If you got something you want to throw in there real quick, Rita, just a quick minute, and then Noel, a quick minute, and then we're gonna go to the common ground section from our 4 original speakers.
I'll be quick, believe it or not. Tristan Harris. I just want to mention that name. And his Angel, you might be able to help me with the name of his it's about morality, about human technology and what it owes to us as a society. Does everyone know who Tristan Harris? Have y'all ever seen the Social Dilemma?
Oh yeah, yeah.
He actually was very instrumental with Facebook, and he was joined also by someone from Twitter, I believe, a leader in Twitter, and they came together and they formed this humane. I'm sorry, I can't, but look up the name, Tristan Harris. And Angel, if you've got anybody else there. And also one last thing. I have to say that I believe that there's a lot of socialization that is going on with these companies with our young people. And, you know, we talked about how many other choices there were out there, but what do young people do?
Yeah.
Attracted to what their peers are attracted to. So.
Yep, attracted to what their peers are. Very good. And Noel, you will be our final what's your final note from our audience, and then we're going to go to the common ground section for a couple or a minute or so from each of our speakers.
Great, thank you. Just one other quick thought. I was really surprised. I was just trying to keep an open mind and not form an opinion, but I found I was really surprised that the actual harms from some kinds of speech on social media never came up. And it could be part of who's in the room. I think it's mostly younger women, Black and brown people, who are the ones who get doxxed, and people come to their houses with guns. They're told they're going to be attacked and really, really awful things. They have nightmares and quit their jobs and disappear. But I think it's actually a special characteristic of social media. There's this disinhibition that happens, that you say things you wouldn't, you accuse people, you use language you never would in person. So I think there actually is something special about it. And I'm actually now feeling that even if we don't limit speech in newspapers and other things, that maybe there are some good reasons to specifically limit social media speech because of that effect. So I was really convinced by all of you until I suddenly thought of what wasn't here. So just wanted to add that. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Noel. Appreciate you sharing that. All right. We are going to go through and allow, let's see, we're going to go through and allow our 4 speakers to have a minute or two to just see what kind of things that you've seen as a common ground out of our conversation tonight. I know everybody made some incredible points, some different, some not so different, but I think there was definitely some common ground. So what did you see as some common ground points? We'll start with you, Angel. Take a minute or so just to talk about what you've seen as common ground, and then for everybody that's still here in the audience, I think Hank is going to put together a poll that we'd like everybody to participate in yet tonight. So Angel, what do you got for common ground perspective that you've seen out of our conversation here tonight?
I have nothing but common ground, honestly. I think even if we differ on specific points or at least points of emphasis, we're all here because we care. We're all here because we want to fix something that we see as not right or totally wrong. And as far as I'm concerned, that's as much common ground as I need. You know, I'm on the same team as all of you, you know. I always say, well, I'm not the same team. I don't like saying team. But I always say, you know, anyone who thinks that I'm on their team is wrong, but anyone who thinks that I'm not on their side is also wrong.
Very good.
You know, that's how I feel about all of this. It's wonderful. We need to talk about this stuff. I'm glad we are.
Awesome, man. Very cool, Angel. Thank you very much. And next we'll go to Dan. What do you think?
If I could, I'd like to toss a little wrinkle into this, since I was out for a large portion of the event. I'd like to toss this to Lincoln, our state coordinator, and get his thoughts, because he was actually here for the whole thing. So Lincoln, I'm flicking that booger onto your windshield.
Take Lincoln, take Dan's minute for what you've seen out of here for Common Ground, and then we'll go to Aaron.
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Dan. I'm glad you were able to get back in, and thank you for what you brought to the conversation. Yeah, I agree. I think that I'm glad, Noel, that you brought that up at the end, and I'm sorry that that was at the end, because I wish that we had time to engage that, because I think there's a lot that was left out of this conversation. But I do really appreciate this feels like a good start to a big conversation and an important aspect of the conversation. So even though there's a lot left out, I really appreciate all of you for what you brought. And I think the common ground, yeah, I think acknowledging that there's a problem with lots of different avenues towards solution is great. And to the degree that people from different backgrounds, from different angles see that and are able to agree on that, that feels like the most important starting point. So yeah, I think getting into the legal questions and getting into the structural questions of what would it mean to change that problem is important, but this feels like great ground that we're covering. So
very cool. Thank you very much, Lincoln. And next we'll go to Aaron. What are your common ground thoughts? What do you see as coming out of this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a large degree of agreement. I think, I think something that I've been thinking about that I think the speakers agree on is that I think we all are saying that exposure to ideas serves a protective function for society, and maybe in particular, those in society who have the least amount of power. Yet there's also, I think, the humane tension has been brought up tonight that, as a result of that trade-off, it may be that there will be more nastiness. And, so I don't know. I think that we all have agreed on that. And it's very interesting to hear other points of view. It's really helped me to, even though we're saying a lot of the same things, it's helping to think about, my take on this.
Broaden your thoughts on it. Very nice. Jeffrey Lockwood, you'll wrap up our common ground portion. What do you think about this conversation? What do you see as common ground?
So a couple of points I want to make. First of all, I wanted to reiterate what Lincoln said about Noel's point. That was a very good point. There's a lot of stuff I feel like wasn't able to get touched on tonight, and I feel like this is a topic that probably could go on for days, debate or whatever. But another thing, the area of agreement I found was Dan earlier said something about corporations or free speech, or they can use free speech or whatever, with the Citizens United being overturned or whatever. I think that was a big problem. I think that's a big problem with our politics and everything in our country today. But as far as common ground, I think that I feel like we were all saying the same thing. It's a problem, but the solution is so diverse and complex that there's just no real simple solution to it or simple answer. But I think we are all agreeing that it's definitely a problem. And after listening to Jerry and what Lincoln said earlier, it's obviously being abused quite a bit too. So by our own government. So yeah, that's just where I'm standing at right now. I really
Very good.
appreciate this discussion. There's a lot of points that I hadn't thought of before, and Aaron, I really liked your take on it coming from a psychological standpoint. This is all great, so I want to just thank everybody for their points tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And yeah, I greatly appreciate everybody's participation in this tonight. It's been incredible. So Hank's going to put up a little poll here now, I believe, right, Hank? To for everybody to fill out here. Do I see Hank still in here somewhere?
Yes, yes, you do.
Okay.
Okay, I am about to send you a link in the chat to everyone. And when you click on the link, you'll be brought to the ballot. And what I'm going to do is share doing the ballot so you can see how it's done, because this is ranked choice voting. And if you've never done it before, it could be sort of, but it is a way, you know, what I like about ranked choice voting is that every voice gets heard.
Mhm.
And the candidate who wins is liked more than by at least half the people. So, so that sounds like a good idea to me. Okay, so chat, here we go. And to all, everyone in the meeting, and here we go. And
Did it come through?
There we go.
So yeah, if everybody wants to fill that out.
And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take the poll. The questions will be in an order that is different for every person. And I am now going to share my screen. And that would be screen 2. And let me get this out of the way. Okay, so which one do I think is most important? Well, I'm going to do it 8462.
I'm
Hank,
not
we don't see
I'm
your
not seeing
screen
your
yet.
screen.
Oh, it didn't do it. I'm sorry.
There
How
we go.
about now? There you go.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to do first choice 8, and then second choice 6, and third choice 4, and fourth choice 2. Whoops. See, now I made a mistake. I skipped one. So if I do that, then I'm all set. And that was good that I did that, because now you realize what it is. And then I'm going to do 1, 3, 5, 7. And notice on the right hand side here, ranked, and there's my rankings. Okay. And then I push vote. Ta-da, done.
All right.
And now you guys vote, and actually as you vote, it's going to alter what we have here, but of course my vote is going to mess everything up, but that's too bad. The strength will come through.
All right.
So go ahead, open that link up in your browser and vote away.
And as everybody's voting, I just want to say very quickly how much all of us at Braver Angels, and especially the We the People's Project, appreciate you taking some time out of your evening. Not just our speakers, who that was incredible of each of you to dedicate your time tonight to speak, but also all of our guests this evening those that spoke and those that just observed. Anybody who is interested in becoming a part of Braver Angels can go to, I know Apple's been putting it in the chat tonight, the link. Go to braverangels.org and join us. It's an incredible organization. Costs very little, but an incredible amount of work is being done by this organization to bridge that political divide, help people have conversations again in a civil way. And as most of us know, I think everybody here tonight knows, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here, as we all know that if we don't get back to having civil conversations, we're in real trouble. So Hank, did you have something else?
No, we're what we will do is get the final vote, and in the email that you get tomorrow from Braver Angels saying thanks for coming to our meeting and contributing, and we'll send you a picture of the voting.
All right, very good. Well, with that, yeah, and as David reminded me, everybody is we've got an incredible convention coming up for Braver Angels. The National Convention for Braver Angels is in July, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, Gettysburg College, and I'll be honored enough to speak there with Dr. Francis Collins, doing our Truth and Trust project, and so I will be at the National Convention, as well as many other incredible speakers. There's going to be so much going on there. It's definitely something you're going to want to check out. So be following the website for more information on Gettysburg, the National Braver Angels Convention. So.